In the heavy heat of the afternoon, a grey car speeds through the lanes of a crowded avenue. In the back seat, a German shepherd with broken legs struggles in silence, covered in dried wounds. Without slowing down, the driver opens the door and throws the dog into the middle of the road. Amid exhaust fumes and screeching brakes, an elderly woman pushing a baby stroller stops abruptly. Without thinking, she leaves the stroller and runs toward the animal, ignoring traffic. A photographer, camera in hand, watches without moving, and for 1 second, everything stopped. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for being with us. Now, back to our story. The blazing sun cast long shadows across Maple Avenue in downtown Denver, Colorado, as the usual afternoon chaos unfolded. Cars honked impatiently, while pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, each lost in their own world of daily concerns and responsibilities. Margaret Thompson, 72 years old with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, walked slowly down the bustling street, carefully pushing a stroller that held her 18-month-old grandson, Tommy. The little boy's bright blue eyes took in everything around him with wonder, his chubby hands reaching out toward the colorful storefronts and the dancing leaves that occasionally fell from the maple trees lining the avenue. Margaret had been taking care of Tommy since her daughter Sarah had to travel for work, and these afternoon walks had become their special routine together. "Look at those pretty leaves, sweetheart," Margaret cooed to Tommy, pointing at the golden autumn foliage above them. The boy giggled and clapped his hands, his infectious laughter bringing a warm smile to his grandmother's face. Despite her age, Margaret felt energized whenever she spent time with Tommy. His presence filled a void in her heart that had been there since her husband passed away 3 years ago. As they continued their leisurely stroll, Margaret noticed a commotion ahead. A sleek black car had pulled up abruptly to the curb, its engine still running. She slowed her pace, instinctively protective of Tommy, when suddenly the passenger door swung open. To her absolute horror, someone pushed a large German shepherd out of the vehicle before the car sped away, tires screeching against the asphalt. The dog hit the pavement hard, letting out a painful whimper that pierced through the city noise. Margaret gasped, her heart racing as she watched the beautiful animal struggle to stand. Its front legs appeared to be injured, and she could see patches of matted fur and what looked like old scars across its body. The poor creature's eyes held a mixture of pain and confusion as it looked around desperately. Without a moment's hesitation, Margaret abandoned her usual cautious nature and hurried toward the injured animal, pushing Tommy's stroller ahead of her. The German shepherd tried to back away, clearly terrified and in pain. But something in Margaret's gentle approach seemed to calm it slightly. "Easy there, beautiful," Margaret whispered softly, her voice carrying the same soothing tone she used with Tommy. "I'm not going to hurt you." She carefully positioned the stroller at a safe distance and knelt down, ignoring the sharp pain in her arthritic knees. Tommy, from his stroller, seemed transfixed by the dog. The usually babbling toddler had gone completely quiet, his wide eyes fixed on the animal with an intensity that surprised Margaret. Then, to her amazement, Tommy spoke his first clear word in weeks. "Doggy." The sound of the child's innocent voice had an immediate effect on the German shepherd. The animal's ears perked up and its tail gave the faintest wag despite its obvious pain. There was something almost magical about the connection that seemed to form instantly between the injured dog and the little boy. Margaret looked around, hoping someone might have witnessed what happened or could help, but the busy street continued its normal flow. People walked by, too engrossed in their phones or their hurried schedules to notice the drama unfolding on the sidewalk. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her as she realized how disconnected everyone had become from each other. "We can't just leave you here, can we?" Margaret murmured to the dog, her maternal instincts overriding any practical concerns. The German Shepherd seemed to understand her intentions and allowed her to come closer. Margaret noticed that despite its injuries and apparent neglect, the dog wore a collar with what appeared to be some kind of identification tag. As she reached out to examine the collar more closely, Margaret became aware of someone watching them. A man with a professional camera stood about 20 feet away, partially hidden behind a lamppost. He had been capturing the entire scene, his lens focused not just on her and the dog, but particularly on Tommy's reactions. The photographer was tall and lean, probably in his 40s, with dark hair and an intense expression. Something about his presence made Margaret uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. He wasn't being threatening or obvious about his photography, but there was something deliberate about the way he positioned himself and the calculated manner in which he documented their interaction. Margaret tried to dismiss her unease, focusing instead on the immediate problem of the injured animal. The German Shepherd had allowed her to get close enough to see that the identification tag was actually a small metal chip embedded in a specially designed collar. She had heard about these microchips that pet owners use to track their animals, but she had never seen one up close. "Someone's looking for you, aren't they, boy?" she whispered to the dog, who seemed to respond to her gentle tone by relaxing slightly. Tommy continued to watch from his stroller, occasionally making soft cooing sounds that seemed to comfort the animal. The photographer took a few more shots and then began to move closer, pretending to be interested in the shop windows nearby. Margaret's instincts told her to be cautious, but she was more concerned about getting help for the injured dog than about some stranger with a camera. She looked down at the German Shepherd again, noticing how the animal's intelligent brown eyes seemed to hold secrets. There was something almost human about the way it looked at her, as if it was trying to communicate something important. The dog's breathing was labored, and Margaret knew she needed to get it medical attention quickly. Making a decision that would change everything that followed, Margaret carefully helped the dog to its feet, supporting its weight as best she could. The animal was larger and heavier than she had anticipated, but it seemed to understand that she was trying to help and cooperated as much as its injuries allowed. "Come on, sweetie," she said, addressing both Tommy and the dog. "We're going to find someone who can help." She began pushing the stroller with one hand while supporting the limping German Shepherd with the other, moving slowly but determinedly down the street. The photographer followed at a discreet distance, his camera ready but no longer actively shooting. Margaret caught glimpses of him in storefront reflections and began to feel increasingly uneasy about his persistent presence. Who was he, and why was he so interested in documenting their situation? As they made their way down Maple Avenue, Margaret's mind raced with questions. Who would abandon such a beautiful animal in such a cruel manner? What was the significance of the microchip collar? And why did she have the nagging feeling that this seemingly random encounter was about to change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine? Tommy continued to babble softly to the dog, his little hands reaching out from the stroller toward their new companion. The German Shepherd, despite its pain, seemed drawn to the child's presence, occasionally looking back at the stroller with what could only be described as protective concern. Margaret had always believed that everything happened for a reason, and as they slowly made their progress down the busy street, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from coincidental. The mysterious photographer, the injured dog with its high-tech collar, and Tommy's unusual reaction to the animal all felt like pieces of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. The afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows as they approached the veterinary clinic that Margaret remembered seeing during their previous walks. Dr. James Morrison's practice was known throughout the neighborhood, for his compassionate care of animals, and Margaret hoped he would be able to help their unexpected companion. As they reached the clinic's front door, Margaret glanced back one more time and saw the photographer still maintaining his distance, now pretending to examine his camera settings. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that their simple afternoon walk had somehow drawn them into something much more complex and potentially dangerous than a straightforward animal rescue. The bell above the door chimed softly as Margaret pushed Tommy's stroller into the veterinary clinic, the injured German shepherd limping beside them. The waiting room was quiet except for the gentle hum of an aquarium filter and the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. Dr. James Morrison emerged from the back office almost immediately, his kind eyes taking in the unusual sight of the elderly woman with a baby and an obviously distressed animal. "Mrs. Thompson, what do we have here?" Dr. Morrison asked, his voice gentle but professional. He was a man in his early 50s, with graying temples and calloused hands that spoke of years spent caring for animals. Margaret had brought her late husband's cat to this clinic several times before it passed away from old age, and she had always been impressed by the veterinarian's compassionate approach. "Doctor, I found this poor dog abandoned on Maple Avenue," Margaret explained, her voice trembling slightly from both the physical exertion and emotional stress of the situation. "Someone just pushed him out of a car and drove away. His legs appear to be injured, and he has these scars." Dr. Morrison knelt down beside the German shepherd, his experienced hands gently examining the animal without causing additional distress. The dog seemed to sense the veterinarian's expertise and allowed the examination, though its eyes remained alert and somewhat wary. "This is a beautiful animal," Dr. Morrison murmured, running his hands along the dog's coat. "Male, probably around 4 years old, purebred German shepherd. These injuries on his legs are healing fractures, probably a few weeks old. Someone has been treating them, but not professionally." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "And these scars, they're not from accidents." Margaret felt her heart sink. "You mean someone hurt him deliberately?" "It's possible," Dr. Morrison replied carefully, not wanting to upset her further. "But what's more interesting is this collar. This isn't a standard pet identification system." He examined the metallic device more closely. "This is a GPS tracking collar, very expensive, military grade. Someone invested serious money in keeping track of this dog." Tommy had been unusually quiet during the examination, but suddenly he reached out from his stroller toward the German shepherd and spoke clearly. "Max!" The dog's reaction was immediate and startling. His ears perked up, his tail wagged vigorously despite his injuries, and he looked directly at Tommy with what could only be described as recognition. Dr. Morrison and Margaret exchanged amazed glances. "Did he just say Max?" Dr. Morrison asked incredulously. "Tommy rarely speaks clearly," Margaret whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's been delayed in his speech development. How could he possibly know this dog's name?" Dr. Morrison carefully removed the high-tech collar and brought it to his computer station. "Let me see what information this tracking device contains," he said, connecting the collar to a specialized reader. "These GPS units usually store owner information, medical records, and location history." As the computer processed the data, Margaret noticed movement outside the clinic's large front window. The mysterious photographer was now positioned across the street, no longer trying to hide his presence. He had a clear view of the clinic's interior and was openly photographing their activities. "Doctor," Margaret said nervously, "there's a man outside who's been following us and taking pictures. I don't know who he is or what he wants." "Dr. Morrison," looked up from his computer screen and followed Margaret's gaze. "That's odd. Let me see what this collar reveals first, then we'll address our observer." He turned back to the monitor, his expression growing increasingly puzzled. "This is very strange, Mrs. Thompson. According to the GPS data, this dog has been traveling across multiple states over the past several months. The ownership information is encrypted, but I can see partial records." "What kind of partial records?" Margaret asked, moving closer to the screen while keeping one eye on Tommy, who continued to interact with Max in the most natural way. "The dog's registered name is indeed Max, and he's been trained for specialized work. But here's what's truly unusual. The last registered location before today was a facility in Wyoming that specializes in therapy animal training. According to these records, Max was being prepared for placement with a family that had a special needs child." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. A special needs child. Yes, specifically a child with developmental delays and speech difficulties. Dr. Morrison continued reading. "The training was supposed to be completed last month, but there's no record of the placement being finalized. Instead, the GPS shows Max being moved around constantly, never staying in one location for more than a few days." Tommy suddenly spoke again, this time reaching both hands toward Max and saying distinctly, "My doggy." Max responded by carefully, moving closer to the stroller, positioning himself protectively beside Tommy despite his injured legs. The connection between the child and the animal was undeniable and somehow profound. "Doctor, is it possible that this dog was meant for Tommy?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Morrison turned to look at her with surprise. "What makes you ask that?" "My daughter Sarah has been working with specialists about Tommy's speech delays. She mentioned something about therapy, animals, but I thought it was just one of many options they were exploring." Margaret's mind raced as she tried to recall conversations with her daughter. "Sarah's been traveling so much for work lately, handling some kind of special project. She's been very secretive about it. Mrs. Thompson, do you have any documentation about Tommy's therapy evaluations?" Dr. Morrison asked, his professional curiosity now fully engaged. "Not with me, but Sarah keeps all of Tommy's medical files at home. She's very organized about that." Margaret paused, watching as Max gently nuzzled Tommy's outstretched hand. "But if this dog was meant for Tommy, why was he abandoned like that? And why is someone following us and taking pictures?" Dr. Morrison glanced toward the window where the photographer remained visible. "I think we need to contact your daughter and find out exactly what kind of project she's been working on. In the meantime, let me treat Max's injuries and we'll keep him here safely while we sort this out." As Dr. Morrison began preparing medical supplies, Margaret's phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number and Margaret answered immediately. "Mom, are you and Tommy okay?" Sarah's voice sounded strained and worried. "We're fine, sweetheart, but something very strange has happened," Margaret began and proceeded to tell her daughter about finding Max and their current situation at the veterinary clinic. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Sarah spoke again, her voice tight with emotion. "Mom, you need to listen to me very carefully. I've been working on a special assignment that involves placing therapy animals with children who need them. Tommy was selected for a pilot program, but there have been some complications." "What kind of complications?" Margaret asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer wouldn't be simple. "The organization I've been working with has been having internal disputes about their methods and protocols. Some people involved in the program have been making unauthorized decisions about animal placements. I think someone may have taken Max before his official placement could be finalized." Margaret looked at Max, who was now sitting calmly beside Tommy's stroller, and at the photographer still visible across the street. "Sarah, there's a man who's been following us and taking pictures." Do you think he's connected to this situation? Describe him to me, Sarah said urgently. Tall, dark hair, probably in his 40s, professional camera equipment. Oh no, Sarah interrupted. Mom, that might be Michael Bradley. He's a private investigator who's been looking into irregularities within the therapy animal program. If he's there, it means the situation is more complicated than I thought. Dr. Morrison, who had been listening to the conversation while treating, Max looked up with concern. Mrs. Thompson, I think you should ask your daughter to come here immediately. And perhaps we should invite Mr. Bradley inside to explain why he's been documenting your activities. Margaret felt overwhelmed by the rapidly developing situation. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward an injured animal was revealing layers of complexity she couldn't have imagined. Tommy, seemingly oblivious to the adult concerns around him, continued to babble happily to Max, who responded with gentle attentiveness that reinforced the obvious bond between them. Sarah, can you come to Dr. Morrison's clinic right away? Margaret asked. I think we need to understand exactly what's been going on and why Tommy and this dog seem to know each other. I'm on my way, Mom. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Mom, don't let Tommy out of your sight, and don't leave the clinic until I arrive. There are people involved in this situation who may not have Tommy's best interests at heart. As Margaret ended the call, she realized that their peaceful afternoon walk had thrust them into the middle of something much larger and more complex than she had ever anticipated. The mysterious photographer, the specially trained dog, and Tommy's unexpected reactions were all pieces of a puzzle that was only beginning to reveal its true scope and implications. 25 minutes later, Sarah Thompson burst through the clinic door, her usually composed professional appearance disheveled from her hurried journey across town. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her business suit showed wrinkles that spoke of her urgent rush to reach them. At 35, Sarah had always been the picture of controlled efficiency, but today, anxiety radiated from every line of her body. "Tommy!" she exclaimed, immediately going to her son and lifting him from the stroller into a fierce embrace. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Tommy giggled at his mother's sudden appearance, pointing excitedly at Max, who had remained protectively close to the stroller throughout the wait. "Doggy, Mama! My doggy," Tommy said clearly, his words bringing tears to Sarah's eyes. "He's been speaking more clearly since we found Max," Margaret observed, still amazed by her grandson's sudden verbal progress. "Sarah, what exactly is going on? And who is this Michael Bradley person?" Before Sarah could answer, the clinic door opened again, and the mysterious photographer stepped inside. Up close, Michael Bradley appeared less intimidating than he had. From a distance, his weathered face showed laugh lines around his green eyes, and his demeanor was more weary than threatening. He carried his camera equipment in a professional bag and approached them with careful, non-aggressive movements. "Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Sarah Thompson," he said with a slight nod of acknowledgement. "I apologize for the unconventional surveillance, but I needed to document what happened to Max here. My name is Michael Bradley, and I'm a private investigator hired to look into irregularities within the Healing Paws therapy program." Dr. Morrison looked up from where he was finishing Max's treatment. "The dog is going to be fine. The fractures are healing well, and with proper care, he should make a full recovery. But I'm very interested in hearing about these irregularities Mr. Bradley mentioned." Sarah set Tommy back in his stroller, keeping one hand protectively on his shoulder. "Mom, Michael, Dr. Morrison, I think you all deserve to know the truth about what's been happening." She took a deep breath before continuing. 3 months ago, I was approached by Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, who runs the Healing Paws therapy program. They had developed an innovative approach to matching therapy animals with special needs children using advanced behavioral analysis and Compatibility testing. And Tommy was selected for this program, Margaret asked, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Not just selected, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. According to Dr. Hawthorne's evaluation, Tommy and Max were what she called a perfect neurological match. The testing showed that Max's specific training and temperament were ideally suited to help Tommy with his speech development and social interaction skills. Michael Bradley moved closer, his expression serious but sympathetic. The problem is that Dr. Hawthorne's program operates outside of traditional therapy animal organizations. She's developed her own methods and protocols that haven't been officially approved by established animal therapy institutions. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Morrison asked, looking concerned. It means that while her methods appear to be effective, there are questions about the legitimacy of her operation and the sources of her funding, Michael continued. I was hired by the American Association of Therapy Animals to investigate reports of unauthorized animal acquisitions and questionable placement procedures. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and worry. I had no idea there were problems with the program when I enrolled Tommy. Dr. Hawthorne presented impressive credentials and research data. The preliminary tests with Max showed remarkable results for Tommy's development. What kind of tests? Margaret asked, watching as Tommy continued to interact naturally with Max despite the serious conversation happening around him. They did several sessions where Tommy and Max worked together with specialized trainers, Sarah explained. Tommy showed more verbal communication in those few sessions than he had in months of traditional therapy. Max seemed to understand exactly what Tommy needed before anyone else even recognized it. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That's consistent with what I've observed from other families in the program. The animal-child matches appear to be genuinely beneficial, but the process of acquiring and training these animals raises ethical questions. Dr. Morrison finished checking Max's bandages and looked up with interest. What kind of ethical questions? Dr. Hawthorne has been obtaining animals from questionable sources, Michael explained. Not illegal sources, but places like failed breeding operations. Animals returned from other programs, and sometimes animals whose previous placements didn't work out for various reasons. The concern is that she's not always transparent with families about the animals' backgrounds. Max's background? Sarah asked with growing worry. Michael pulled out a tablet and showed them a file. Max was originally trained for military service, but he was discharged due to what they classified as excessive emotional sensitivity. Instead of being a weakness, this trait made him particularly suitable for therapy work. However, his previous placement with another family ended abruptly when the family moved overseas and couldn't take Max with them. So he's been bounced around, Margaret felt, her heart aching for the beautiful dog who was now resting peacefully beside Tommy's stroller. 3 different placements in 18 months, Michael confirmed. Each time, Max formed strong bonds with his assigned child, and each time, circumstances beyond anyone's control resulted in separation. According to the psychological evaluations, these repeated separations have been traumatic for Max, making him simultaneously more determined to protect his assigned child and more anxious about potential abandonment. Sarah knelt down to Tommy's level, watching as her son gently patted Max's head. That explains why he was so protective when I first brought Tommy to meet him, and why he seemed distressed when we had to leave him at the training facility for additional preparation. Wait, Margaret interrupted. If Tommy and Max were already matched and had been working together, why was Max abandoned on the street today? Michael's expression darkened. That's the part of the story that brought me here. Yesterday, Dr. Hawthorne's facility was shut down pending investigation of her methods and financial practices. All the animals in her program were supposed to be temporarily relocated to approved facilities while the investigation continues. But Max wasn't relocated, Dr. Morrison asked. Max disappeared from the facility the night before the shutdown, Michael explained. Security footage shows someone removing him, but the identity of that person hasn't been determined. When I heard reports of a German Shepherd being abandoned in this area, I suspected it might be Max and came to investigate. Sarah stood up, her face pale with realization. Someone stole Max from the facility and then just threw him away. It appears that way, Michael confirmed. But here's what I find interesting. Whoever took Max brought him directly to this neighborhood, almost as if they knew Tommy would be here for his afternoon walk with his grandmother. A chill ran through the room as the implications of Michael's statement settled over them. Margaret looked around at the faces of the adults, then down at Tommy, who was completely absorbed in his gentle interaction with Max. "Are you suggesting this wasn't random?" Dr. Morrison asked. "I'm suggesting that someone wanted Max to be found by Tommy and his family, but they didn't want to be directly involved in making that happen," Michael replied. "The question is who and why they chose this indirect method." Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her recent messages. "I received a text this morning from an unknown number. I thought it was spam, but now..." She showed them the message. "Tommy's friend needs help on Maple Avenue. Time for an afternoon walk." Margaret gasped. "Someone knew about our walking routine and wanted us to find Max?" "But who would know your schedule and also have access to Max?" Dr. Morrison wondered aloud. "Someone from Dr. Hawthorne's program," Michael said grimly. "Someone who cares about Max and Tommy's relationship but can't openly defy the facility shutdown." Tommy suddenly looked up at the adults and spoke with unusual clarity. "Dr. Beth." The room fell silent. Sarah knelt down, again beside her son. "Tommy, what did you say?" "Dr. Beth," Tommy repeated, pointing at Max. "Dr. Beth said Max is my doggy forever." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Michael. "Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne. Tommy calls her Dr. Beth. She was the one who oversaw all of Max's training with Tommy. And she would have had access to Max before the facility shut down," Michael added thoughtfully. "She would also know about Tommy's routine and your family's schedule." Dr. Morrison cleaned his hands and looked at the group assembled in his clinic. "So we have a therapy dog who belongs with Tommy, a program director who may have orchestrated their reunion, and an investigation that threatens to separate them again. What happens now?" Margaret looked at her grandson, who was now holding onto Max's collar with one small hand, while using his other hand to show the dog his favorite toy from the stroller. The bond between them was unmistakable and profound. "Now we figure out how to make sure Tommy and Max stay together," she said with determination that surprised everyone, including herself. "If Dr. Hawthorne went to these lengths to ensure they found each other, there must be a way to make this placement official and permanent, regardless of what happens to her program." Michael smiled for the first time since entering the clinic. "Mrs. Thompson, I think you might be exactly the advocate Tommy and Max need, and I think I know someone who can help us navigate the legal and bureaucratic challenges ahead." The following morning, Margaret's modest Denver home had been transformed into an impromptu investigation headquarters. Michael Bradley had set up his laptop on the kitchen table, surrounded by files and documents related to the Healing Paws program. Sarah sat across from him, feeding Tommy his breakfast, while Max lay peacefully at the toddler's feet, as if he had always belonged there. Dr. Morrison had arrived early, bringing with him Dr. Patricia Caldwell, a colleague who specialized in animal-assisted therapy and legal advocacy for therapy animal placements. Dr. Caldwell was a woman, In her 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an impressive background in both veterinary medicine and family law. "I've reviewed Michael's research about Dr. Hawthorne's program," Dr. Caldwell said, spreading several official-looking documents across the table. "While her methods were unconventional, the results documented in these files are remarkable. Tommy's progress reports show advancement that typically takes months to achieve through traditional therapy." Tommy looked up from his high chair at the mention of his name, then pointed at Max and clearly said, "Max helps Tommy talk." The adults exchanged amazed glances, as this was the longest sentence any of them had heard from the little boy. "Exactly," Dr. Caldwell continued with a smile. "This kind of breakthrough is precisely why we need to find Dr. Hawthorne and understand what happened to her program." Michael pulled up a new screen on his laptop. "I've been tracking Dr. Hawthorne's movements since the facility closure. She didn't disappear entirely. According to her credit card records, which I obtained through legal channels, she's been staying at a small bed and breakfast about an hour outside of Denver. Why hasn't she contacted us directly?" Sarah wondered aloud. "If she cares about Tommy and Max's relationship, why all the secrecy?" "Because," Dr. Caldwell explained, "she's facing serious allegations about her program's funding and animal acquisition methods. Any direct contact with program participants could be construed as interference with the investigation. She's protecting herself legally while trying to protect the animals and children she's worked with." Margaret, who had been quietly listening while preparing coffee, turned to face the group. "What if we went to see her? Not as part of any official investigation, but as a family concerned about Tommy's welfare." Michael considered this suggestion. "It's possible, but we'd need to be careful about how we approach it. Dr. Hawthorne might be reluctant to speak openly if she feels it could compromise her legal situation." "What exactly are the allegations against her?" Dr. Morrison asked. Dr. Caldwell consulted her notes. "The primary concerns involve the source of her funding and whether she was operating without proper licensing from state and federal animal and therapy organizations. There are also questions about her animal acquisition practices, though nothing suggests actual wrongdoing with the animals themselves." "Financial irregularities," Sarah pressed. "Her program was funded by several anonymous donors who provided substantial grants," Michael explained. "The investigators want to verify that these donors don't have conflicts of interest or ulterior motives for supporting her work." Tommy had finished his breakfast and was now sitting on the floor beside Max, showing the dog his collection of toy cars. Max watched attentively as Tommy lined up the vehicles, occasionally nudging one with his nose when Tommy seemed to want help. The interaction was so natural and therapeutic that it reinforced everyone's conviction that these two belonged together. "Look at them," Margaret said softly. "How can anyone question the value of what Dr. Hawthorne accomplished?" Dr. Caldwell nodded agreement. "The therapeutic relationship is undeniable. The legal challenge is ensuring that Tommy can keep Max regardless of what happens to Dr. Hawthorne's organization." "What would that require?" Sarah asked. "We'd need to establish Tommy as Max's official owner and register Max as Tommy's certified therapy animal through an approved organization," Dr. Caldwell explained. "It's complicated by the fact that Max technically still belongs to the Healing Paws program, which is currently under investigation." Michael looked up from his computer screen with excitement. "I think I've found something important. Dr. Hawthorne published several research papers about her therapy methods before starting the Healing Paws program. According to these publications, she developed her approach after her own experience with a child who had severe developmental delays." "Her own child?" Margaret asked. "The papers are written carefully to protect privacy, but they reference a case study of a non-verbal child who made dramatic progress through interaction with a specially trained German Shepherd," Michael continued. "Reading. The child's progress was so remarkable that it inspired Dr. Hawthorne to develop her entire program methodology. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Michael, what year were those papers published? The initial research was published 7 years ago, with follow-up studies appearing every year until 3 years ago, when the publication stopped. Dr. Morrison leaned forward with interest. What happened 3 years ago? Michael continued scrolling through the research archives. According to this biographical information, Dr. Hawthorne took a leave of absence from the University of Colorado to deal with a personal family situation. When she returned, she had left academia entirely and founded the Healing Paws program. Do we know anything about the family situation? Dr. Caldwell asked. Not from public records, Michael replied, but I did find something interesting. The address listed for Dr. Hawthorne's emergency contact during her university employment is the same bed and breakfast where she's currently staying. Margaret set down her coffee cup with sudden understanding. It's not just where she's hiding, it's where she lives. That bed and breakfast must be her family property, which would explain how she could afford to start an expensive therapy program without traditional institutional funding, Sarah added, the pieces falling into place. Tommy suddenly stood up and walked over to Sarah, something he rarely did, without prompting. He tugged on her sleeve and said distinctly, "Find Dr. Beth. Max misses Dr. Beth." The simple statement from her son made Sarah's decision for her. We're going to see Dr. Hawthorne today. Tommy's right. We need to find her. Doctor. Caldwell gathered her papers with determination. I'll come with you. As Tommy's potential legal advocate, I have legitimate reasons to speak with Dr. Hawthorne about his case. And I'll document the meeting, Michael added. If Dr. Hawthorne is willing to explain her side of the story, it could help resolve the investigation more quickly. Dr. Morrison checked his watch. I can clear my afternoon schedule to monitor Max's recovery and to be available if you need veterinary documentation for any legal proceedings. Margaret looked around at the group of people who had assembled to help her grandson and his remarkable dog. Yesterday morning, she had been a simple grandmother taking her grandchild for a walk. Now she was part of a team determined to fight for what was right, regardless of bureaucratic complications. Then it's settled, Margaret announced with more confidence than she had felt in years. We're going to drive to this bed and breakfast and find out the truth about Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne and her program. As they prepared to leave, Margaret noticed Tommy carefully putting his favorite toy car in his pocket, then whispering something to Max that made the dog's tail wag enthusiastically. Whatever her grandson had said, it was clear that Max understood they were going on an important journey together. Sarah loaded Tommy into his car seat, while Michael and Dr. Caldwell discussed the legal implications of their impromptu visit. Margaret took a moment to look at her home, which just yesterday had been a quiet refuge for a widow and her visiting grandson. Now it felt like the headquarters of a mission that could determine Tommy's future development and Max's permanent placement. Are you ready for this, Mom? Sarah asked as she secured Tommy's stroller in the trunk. Margaret watched as Max positioned himself protectively beside the car, clearly understanding that his boy was inside and needed watching. I don't think I have a choice, sweetheart. Sometimes life presents you with situations where doing nothing isn't an option. As they drove through the Denver suburbs toward the mountain community where Dr. Hawthorne was staying, Margaret reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed in just 24 hours. The mysterious woman who had developed a revolutionary therapy program had somehow orchestrated Tommy and Max's reunion, and now they were about to confront her, to demand answers and fight for a permanent solution. Tommy babbled happily to Max. during the drive, pointing out the window at the changing scenery as they climbed into the foothills. Max remained alert and attentive to the boys' communications, responding with small sounds and movements that seemed to encourage Tommy's verbal expressions. Whatever they discovered about Dr. Hawthorne and her motivations, Margaret was certain of one thing: Tommy and Max belonged together, and she would do whatever it took to make sure that bond remained unbroken. The Mountain View. Bed and breakfast sat nestled among towering pine trees, its rustic charm evident in the hand-carved wooden signs and flower boxes that lined the wraparound porch. As their small convoy pulled into the gravel driveway, Margaret could see why someone seeking solitude would choose this peaceful retreat. The building had the warmth of a family home rather than the sterile atmosphere of a commercial establishment. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne emerged from the front door before they had even parked, as if she had been watching for their arrival. She was a woman in her early 50s with prematurely grey hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a cable-knit sweater that made her appear more like a concerned grandmother than a controversial researcher. Her eyes immediately focused on the car, where Tommy was visible through the window, and Margaret noticed tears beginning to form. "I was wondering when you would find me," Dr. Hawthorne said softly as Sarah lifted Tommy from his car seat. Max bounded out of the vehicle and immediately ran to Dr. Hawthorne, his tail wagging with genuine joy at seeing her again. "Dr. Beth," Tommy exclaimed, reaching out his arms toward the woman who had clearly played an important role in his young life. Dr. Hawthorne knelt down to greet both Tommy and Max, her composure beginning to crack as she embraced them. "Hello, my brave boy," she whispered to Tommy. "And Max, my faithful friend, I've missed you both so much." Margaret felt her own eyes moistening as she watched the reunion. Whatever controversies surrounded Dr. Hawthorne's program, her genuine affection for Tommy and Max was unmistakable. "Dr. Hawthorne," Dr. Caldwell stepped forward with professional courtesy. "I'm Patricia Caldwell, and I represent Tommy's family in matters related to his therapy animal placement. We need to discuss the current situation and find a solution that protects Tommy's interests." "Of course," Dr. Hawthorne replied, standing and wiping her eyes. "Please, all of you, come inside. There's much I need to explain and very little time to do it." The interior of the bed and breakfast was as warm and welcoming as its exterior suggested. Dr. Hawthorne led them to a comfortable sitting room with large windows overlooking the mountain landscape. She had clearly been using this space as both living quarters and office, as papers and files were neatly organized on a large oak table. "Before you ask your questions," Dr. Hawthorne began, settling Tommy on a comfortable couch where Max immediately joined him, "let me tell you why I started the Healing Pause program and why I took such extreme measures to ensure Tommy and Max found each other again." Margaret noticed family photos on the mantelpiece, including several pictures of a young boy who bore a striking resemblance to Tommy. The child in the photos appeared to be about Tommy's current age in the earlier pictures, progressing to school age in later ones. "That's my son Daniel," Dr. Hawthorne said, following Margaret's gaze. "He was diagnosed with severe autism and developmental delays when he was 18 months old. Like Tommy, he was nonverbal and struggled with social connections." Sarah moved closer to the photographs. "He looks so much like Tommy." "The resemblance is what first caught my attention when your family was referred to my program," Dr. Hawthorne admitted. "But it was the similarity in their developmental patterns that convinced me they would be a perfect match for the same therapeutic approach." Michael pulled out his tablet to document the conversation. "Dr. Hawthorne, can you tell us about Daniel's progress and how it led to your research?" Dr. Hawthorne's expression became both proud and deeply sad. "Daniel's breakthrough came when He was 3 years old through his interaction with a German shepherd named Atlas. Atlas had been trained for military service but was retired due to a leg injury. The connection between Daniel and Atlas was immediate and profound, much like what you've observed with Tommy and Max. Did Atlas help Daniel learn to speak? Dr. Caldwell asked, taking notes for her legal documentation. Not just speak, Doctor, Hawthorne replied, her voice filled with wonder at the memory. Daniel went from being non-verbal to having full conversations within 6 months of working with Atlas. He learned to read, to interact socially, to express his emotions. Atlas became his constant companion and guide through childhood. Tommy looked up from where he was quietly playing with Max and said clearly, "Max helps Tommy like Atlas helped Daniel." The adults stared at Tommy in amazement. Dr. Hawthorne knelt down beside him with tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart, Max is your Atlas." "Where is Daniel now?" Margaret asked gently, though she suspected the answer would explain. Dr. Hawthorne's emotional investment in Tommy's case. Dr. Hawthorne took a deep breath before answering. Daniel grew up to be a brilliant, accomplished young man. He graduated from high school with honors, earned a degree in veterinary medicine, and dedicated his life to training therapy animals for other children like himself. 3 years ago, he was traveling to a conference about animal-assisted therapy when his plane encountered severe weather conditions. The room fell silent as everyone understood what Dr. Hawthorne was implying without her having to say the words directly. "I lost both Daniel and Atlas within 6 months of each other," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Atlas was already elderly, and after Daniel's passing, he simply seemed to lose the will to continue. I was devastated and angry and determined that other families shouldn't have to wait years for the kind of help that transformed Daniel's life. Dr. Morrison, who had been quietly observing, spoke with gentle understanding. "So you created the Healing Paws program to honor Daniel's memory and to speed up the process of connecting children with their perfect therapy animals." "Exactly," Dr. Hawthorne confirmed. "Traditional therapy animal programs can take years to complete evaluations and training. I developed accelerated methods based on Daniel's case study and similar success stories. The results were remarkable, but my approach didn't fit within established institutional frameworks. Hence the funding and licensing issues," Michael concluded. "I used my inheritance from my parents to fund the program, supplemented by donations from families whose children had been helped by my methods," Dr. Hawthorne explained. "I was so focused on helping children that I didn't properly navigate the bureaucratic requirements. That was my mistake." Sarah had been listening intently while keeping an eye on Tommy, who was now lying on the floor beside Max, both of them completely relaxed and content. "Dr. Hawthorne, why didn't you contact us directly when the program was shut down? We could have worked together to find a solution." "Because any direct contact could have been viewed as tampering with the investigation," Dr. Hawthorne replied. "But I couldn't bear the thought of Tommy losing Max the way Daniel had lost Atlas, even temporarily. So I arranged for Max to be found by your family in a way that would appear coincidental." "You orchestrated the entire rescue scenario?" Margaret asked with a mixture of admiration and concern. Dr. Hawthorne nodded. "I knew your walking routine from our intake interviews, and I knew that you would never ignore an animal in distress. I had Max's injuries treated by a veterinarian I trusted. Then I had a colleague drive him to Maple Avenue at the right time. I'm sorry for the deception, but I felt it was the only way to ensure Tommy and Max stayed together during the investigation." Dr. Caldwell looked up from her notes with professional interest. "Dr. Hawthorne, are you willing to cooperate fully with the investigation and to help us establish legal guardianship of Max for Tommy's family?" "Absolutely," Dr. Hawthorne replied without hesitation. I have complete documentation of Tommy and Max's compatibility testing, training records, and progress reports. I also have contacts at accredited therapy animal organizations who can expedite the official certification process. Tommy suddenly sat up and looked directly at Dr. Hawthorne. "Dr. Beth stays with Tommy and Max?" he asked with heartbreaking hope in his voice. Dr. Hawthorne's composure finally crumbled completely. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't know if that's possible. I may have to go away for a while because of the mistakes I made with the program." "No," Tommy said firmly, the clearest and most emphatic word anyone had heard from him. "Tommy needs Dr. Beth. Max needs Dr. Beth. Family stays together." Margaret felt her heart breaking for both Tommy and Dr. Hawthorne. This woman had lost her son and had poured her grief and love into helping other children, only to face the possibility of losing access to the work that gave her life meaning. "Dr. Hawthorne," Margaret said with sudden determination, "what if there was a way for you to continue your work legally, with proper oversight and documentation?" Dr. Caldwell looked at Margaret with interest. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Thompson?" "I'm thinking that Dr. Hawthorne has knowledge and experience that could benefit many children beyond Tommy," Margaret replied. "Instead of shutting down her program, perhaps the investigation could result in a partnership with established organizations to formalize and expand her methods." Michael nodded thoughtfully. A collaborative approach could address the legal concerns while preserving the innovative aspects of Dr. Hawthorne's work. Dr. Hawthorne looked around at the group with growing hope. "You would be willing to advocate for that kind of solution?" "Dr. Beth helped Tommy," the little boy said clearly. "Now Tommy helps Dr. Beth." In that moment, Margaret realized that her grandson had not only found his voice through his relationship with Max, but he had also found his heart. The determination to help someone who had helped him showed a level of emotional development that went far beyond speech improvement. "Yes," Margaret said firmly, "we're going to help Dr. Beth just like she helped you, Tommy, because that's what families do for each other." The next 2 weeks transformed Margaret's quiet Denver home into a bustling center of activity that she could never have imagined. Dr. Hawthorne had accepted their invitation to stay in the guest bedroom while they worked together to resolve the legal complexities surrounding the Healing Paws program. Tommy's delight at having Dr. Beth as a constant presence had accelerated his verbal development beyond anyone's expectations. "Good morning, Max. Good morning, Dr. Beth. Good morning, Grandma," Tommy announced cheerfully as he climbed down from his bed, his voice clear and confident. Max, who had taken to sleeping beside Tommy's bed like a devoted guardian, stretched and wagged his tail in response to the enthusiastic greeting. Margaret smiled as she prepared breakfast, still amazed by the transformation in her grandson. Just 2 weeks ago, getting a single clear word from Tommy had been a celebration. Now he was speaking in complete sentences and initiating conversations with everyone around him. Dr. Caldwell arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and wearing an expression of cautious optimism. Over the past fortnight, she had been working tirelessly to navigate the bureaucratic maze surrounding therapy animal certification and Dr. Hawthorne's legal situation. "I have news," she announced as she settled at the kitchen table that had become their unofficial conference room. "The American Association of Therapy Animals has agreed to meet with us next week to discuss a formal partnership with Dr. Hawthorne." Sarah looked up from helping Tommy with his breakfast. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means they're willing to consider incorporating Dr. Hawthorne's methods into their official programs with proper oversight and documentation," Dr. Caldwell explained. "They've reviewed her research and Tommy's progress reports, and they're impressed by the results." Dr. Hawthorne, who had been quietly drinking her coffee, set down her cup with trembling hands. "They're willing to work with me despite the investigation." This says, preliminary investigation findings actually work in your favor, Dr. Caldwell continued. The financial irregularities were determined to be administrative oversights rather than intentional misconduct. Your funding sources have been verified as legitimate, and your animal care practices exceed industry standards. Michael Bradley joined them at the table, his laptop already open and displaying a presentation he had prepared. I've been documenting Tommy and Max's daily interactions for the past 2 weeks, and the progress is remarkable. Tommy's vocabulary has expanded from fewer than 10 clear words to over 200. His social engagement has improved dramatically, and his confidence has grown exponentially. Show them the video from yesterday, Dr. Hawthorne suggested with obvious pride. Michael pulled up a video file showing Tommy in the backyard, clearly instructing Max to perform various commands. Sit, Max, good boy. Now come here and help Tommy with the ball. The little boy's speech in the video was clear, purposeful, and natural. That's not just speech development, Dr. Morrison observed as he watched the footage. Tommy is demonstrating leadership skills, empathy, and complex reasoning. Max isn't just helping him communicate, he's helping him develop emotionally and socially. Tommy, who had finished his breakfast, climbed down from his chair and approached the group of adults. Dr. Beth, he said clearly, Tommy wants to help other kids like Tommy. Max wants to help too. Dr. Hawthorne knelt down to Tommy's level, her eyes bright with unshed tears. What do you mean, sweetheart? Kids who can't talk good need dogs like Max, Tommy explained with the straightforward logic of a child. Dr. Beth knows how to find the right dogs for the right kids. Tommy and Max can show them how it works. The adults exchanged amazed glances. Tommy was not only expressing complex thoughts clearly, but he was also demonstrating empathy and problem-solving skills that were advanced for his age. Tommy, Sarah said softly, are you saying you want to help Dr. Beth with her work? Yes, Mama, Tommy replied confidently. Tommy and Max are a team. Teams help other teams. Dr. Caldwell made notes on her legal pad. Actually, Tommy's suggestion has merit from a legal standpoint. If Tommy and Max serve as demonstration participants in an approved therapy animal program, it would establish their partnership as officially therapeutic rather than simply pet ownership. It would also provide ongoing documentation of their relationship for any future legal challenges, Michael added, still recording their conversation. Dr. Hawthorne stood up, her expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about this possibility. With proper supervision and approval, Tommy and Max could indeed serve as ambassadors for the program. Their success story could help other families understand the potential benefits of accelerated therapy animal matching. But wouldn't that put pressure on Tommy? Margaret asked with concern. He's still just a toddler. Not pressure, Dr. Hawthorne clarified. Natural interaction. Children learn best from other children, and therapy animals work most effectively when they can demonstrate their abilities in real situations. Tommy and Max would simply be doing what they already do naturally, but in a setting where other families could observe and learn. Sarah considered the proposal carefully. What would that involve, practically? Dr. Caldwell consulted her notes. The American Association of Therapy Animals has suggested establishing a pilot program based on Dr. Hawthorne's methods. Tommy and Max would participate in carefully structured sessions with other children and their potential therapy animals. It would be monitored by certified professionals and documented for research purposes. And it would ensure that Tommy and Max's relationship is protected legally, Michael added. They would be officially recognized as a certified therapy team. Tommy had been listening to the adult conversation with remarkable attention. For a child his age, now he spoke up again. Max likes helping kids. Tommy likes helping kids too. When do we start? Dr. Hawthorne laughed through her tears. "Oh, my brave boy, we start as soon as all the grown-ups finish their paperwork." Over the following days, Margaret watched with wonder as her home continued to transform into something resembling a small therapy center. Dr. Caldwell had arranged for representatives from the American Association of Therapy Animals to conduct their preliminary meetings at the house, allowing Tommy and Max to demonstrate their remarkable partnership in a familiar environment. The first family to visit was the Hendersons, whose 4-year-old daughter Emma had been nonverbal since a traumatic medical procedure the previous year. Emma's parents watched in amazement as Tommy encouraged their daughter to pet Max and try to give him simple commands. "Watch, Emma," Tommy said gently, positioning himself where the little girl could see him clearly. "Max likes when you talk to him. Say hi, Max." Emma hesitated for several minutes, but Max seemed to sense her uncertainty and moved closer, resting his head near her hand. Finally, in a whisper so soft that everyone had to strain to hear it, Emma said, "Hi, Max." The room erupted in quiet celebration as Emma's parents realized their daughter had spoken her first word in over 8 months. "How did he know to do that?" Emma's mother asked Dr. Hawthorne with tears in her eyes. "Children who have been where Emma is now often understand each other's needs better than adults do," Dr. Hawthorne explained. "Tommy remembers what it felt like to have words trapped inside, and Max has been trained to recognize and respond to those feelings." Similar scenes played out over the following weeks as Dr. Hawthorne, now working under the official supervision of the American Association of Therapy Animals, conducted careful evaluations of children and potential therapy animals. Tommy and Max became natural ambassadors for the program, demonstrating the possibilities while never being forced to perform or pressured to interact with families who weren't ready. Margaret found herself taking on an unofficial role as program coordinator, managing schedules and providing emotional support to visiting families. Her natural warmth and patience made her an ideal bridge between Dr. Hawthorne's scientific expertise and the emotional needs of worried parents. "Mom," Sarah said one evening as they watched Tommy reading a picture book to Max in the living room, "I think you've found a new calling." Margaret considered her daughter's observation. 6 months ago, her life had felt empty and purposeless after her husband's passing. Now she was part of something that was helping children and families in profound ways. "I think you're right, sweetheart," Margaret replied. "And I think Tommy has too." As if he had heard their conversation, Tommy looked up from his book and announced, "Max and Tommy love their job." The following morning, Dr. Caldwell arrived with the final legal documents that would officially certify Tommy and Max as a therapy team and establish Dr. Hawthorne's new position as Director of Accelerated Therapy Animal Programs under the umbrella of the American Association of Therapy Animals. "It's official," Dr. Caldwell announced with satisfaction. "Tommy Thompson and Max are now a certified therapy animal team. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne is officially reinstated as a therapy animal specialist, and Margaret Thompson has been approved as a program family coordinator." Tommy clapped his hands with delight. "We're all on the same team now." Dr. Hawthorne looked around at the group of people who had become her new family. "Daniel would be so proud of what we've accomplished," she said softly. "And I think Atlas would approve of Max's new role." Margaret felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness toward an abandoned animal had blossomed into a mission that was changing lives. Tommy had not only found his voice, but he had also helped Dr. Hawthorne find her purpose again and had given Margaret a renewed sense of meaning in her own life. As they prepared for the official launch of their expanded program, Margaret knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead, but she also knew that they would face them together as a team united by love, determination, and an unwavering commitment to helping other families discover the transformative power of the special bond between children and their therapy animals. 6 months later, the Thompson family home had been officially converted into the Rocky Mountain Center for Accelerated Therapy Animal Programs. Margaret stood at the kitchen window watching Tommy, now speaking clearly and confidently, as he led a group of children and their potential therapy animals through friendship exercises. "Remember," Tommy was saying to 6-year-old Marcus, "when you feel scared, you can tell Bella with your words. She understands." Marcus placed his hand on the golden retriever. "Bella, I feel scared sometimes, but I feel better when you're here." Bella moved closer, resting her head against his leg. Dr. Hawthorne stood beside Margaret. "He has Daniel's gift," she said softly, "the ability to understand what other children need." Sarah approached carrying applications. "We have 12 new families requesting evaluations this month," she announced, having become the program's family liaison. The success had exceeded expectations. Their methods were being studied for implementation in other cities, and Dr. Hawthorne was speaking at conferences nationwide. Dr. Morrison arrived for his weekly visit. "How's our star therapy team today?" he asked, watching Tommy demonstrate. "Emotional cues with Max." Tommy was explaining to 8-year-old Anna, whose selective mutism was improving. "Max helped me learn that feelings are okay to share." Anna whispered to her border collie, "I feel sad when people don't understand me." The dog placed his paw on her lap, and for the first time, Anna smiled broadly and spoke normally. "He does understand me." Dr. Caldwell arrived with news. The American Association of Therapy Animals has approved funding for 3 additional centers based on our model: Phoenix, Atlanta, and Seattle. Dr. Hawthorne looked overwhelmed. "I never imagined Daniel's story would lead to helping children across the country." Tommy ran over with Max. "Dr. Beth, are you happy crying or sad crying?" "Happy crying, my dear boy," Dr. Hawthorne replied, embracing him. "Good," Tommy said. "Max and Tommy like happy crying better." Margaret felt her heart overflow with joy. 6 months ago, she had been a lonely widow. Now she was part of a thriving program, surrounded by chosen family, watching her grandson flourish beyond her dreams. "There's more," Dr. Caldwell continued. "Colorado has recognized our center as a model program. They're awarding us a grant to establish a training academy for therapy animal specialists." Tommy tugged Margaret's sleeve. "Grandma, does this mean Max and Tommy get to teach grown-ups, too?" "Yes, sweetheart," Margaret laughed. "Max likes teaching," Tommy declared. "We're good at helping people understand each other." That evening, as the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, their expanded family gathered for celebration. Tommy sat on Margaret's lap, watching Max play with other therapy dogs. "Grandma," Tommy said drowsily, "thank you for saving Max." "Sweetheart, I think Max saved us," Margaret replied. "No," Tommy said with certainty. "We all saved each other. That's what families do." Dr. Hawthorne felt tears of gratitude. Tommy was right. They had all saved each other. She had found new purpose and family. Margaret had discovered meaning beyond her previous imagination. Sarah had learned to balance career and family. Tommy had found his voice, and Max had found his permanent home. Margaret reflected on their journey. It began with compassion toward an injured animal and grew into a program helping families nationwide, a new therapy approach, and a chosen family bound by love and commitment to helping others. "Tomorrow we start planning the training academy," Dr. Hawthorne announced. "Next month, we establish sister programs in other cities." "And Tommy and Max will help?" Tommy asked sleepily. Tommy and Max will always be the heart of everything we do, Dr. Hawthorne assured him, as Margaret carried her sleeping grandson inside, with Max following faithfully. She marveled at their transformation. What began as abandonment and rescue became a tale of healing and purpose, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the simplest acts of kindness. The Rocky Mountain Center would help hundreds of families and establish new standards for therapy animal practices. But its greatest success would always be measured in moments like these: a child who found his voice, a dog who found his purpose, and a family who discovered that love transforms everything. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Margaret, Tommy, Max, and Dr. Beth has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. This tale of unexpected family bonds, second chances, and the transformative power of compassion reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives begin with the smallest acts of kindness. If this story has moved you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Share your own stories of unexpected connections and healing in the comments below. We read every single one and are inspired by your experiences. Every day, we bring you new stories that explore the beautiful complexity of human relationships and the remarkable bonds we form with the animals who share our lives. Don't miss our upcoming stories about courage, love, and the extraordinary ways ordinary people make a difference in the world. Join our community of listeners who believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, heal, and connect us all. We'll see you in the comments, and we can't wait to share the next chapter of human and animal connection with you. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Margaret, Tommy, Max, and Dr. Beth has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. This tale of unexpected family bonds, second chances, and the transformative power of compassion reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives begin with the smallest acts of kindness. If this story has moved you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Share your own stories of unexpected connections and healing in the comments below. We read every single one and are inspired by your experiences. Every day, we bring you new stories that explore the beautiful complexity of human relationships and the remarkable bonds we form with the animals who share our lives. Don't miss our upcoming stories about courage, love, and the extraordinary ways ordinary people make a difference in the world. Join our community of listeners who believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, heal, and connect us all. We'll see you in the comments, and we can't wait to share the next chapter of human and animal connection with you.